And we are live. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Also get 7 in 2020, but enough of me. I'm here for you on today's episode of the FV Show. We are trying something a bit different today, and this is going to be the mega episode of my Week 5 game recaps. Break down every single Week 5 matchup, all through the lens of fantasy football. And so the way that this is going to work, it's going to be a little bit different. This is going to be anywhere, I assume, between a 2 and 3 hour video. Just me covering every single game. So if you just want to get everything all at once, this also makes things a lot easier for the podcast and also being able to update the website quickly and efficiently as well, ffvulture.com. But also I can still do the game by game stuff. And what I plan to do is I will leave timestamps down below in the description to quickly navigate each game or whatever game you need information on. But I'm also going to upload each game on an individual basis as well, just because I like doing that. I feel like that really fits the style and the way that I want to do things. But just as a way to guarantee that I can get through every single game on the week, I love this format for it. So let's just get started, shall we? Before we get started, though, actually, follow me on all social media platforms at ffvulture. Like and subscribe this video. We are so close to 100 subscribers, and I would love to hit that by the end here of Week 5 and all the chaos surrounding it. Monday Night Football kicks off in about 45 minutes between the Chargers and the Saints. Today will not be in this video. And then obviously the Tuesday night game between the Bills and the Titans will not be featured as well. I will do 2 separate videos covering both of those games. But now, let's roll, shall we? Game 1, we are going to start off with the Cardinals and the Jets. So as always, let's go to the box score, right? So the Cardinals defeat the Jets by a final score of 30-10. Cardinals improving to 3-2 and the Jets falling to 0-5. Kyler Murray did his thing. 27 of 37 passing, 380 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, one in being a rushing touchdown. He also threw an interception as well. Kenyon Drake found a way to bounce back. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about him today. 18 carries. Again, the volume is there. 60 yards on the ground and a score. Fell into the end zone towards the end of the game. Chase Edmonds ripped off a nice touchdown run. Caught 5 of 6 targets for 92 total yards. And DeAndre Hopkins continues to absolutely feast. He's seeing a 31% team target share, hauling in 6 of 7 targets for 131 yards and a touchdown. For the Jets, there was no Sammy Darnold in this game. Joe Flacco took over because Darnold was out due to that shoulder injury. And Flacco did what you would expect a backup quarterback of his stature to do, right? 18 of 33 passing, 195 yards, and a touchdown. Le'Veon Bell, his first game back after that hamstring injury. 13 carries, 60 yards on the ground. Didn't do anything too special there. In fact, he only got 1 target. More on that in just a little bit too. And Jamison Crowder, again, I was saying this going into this game. Crowder is never going to be a guy that you feel great starting, but even though Sam Darnold was out, the fact that still remained was Jamison Crowder is the only receiving option for this team. So starting him was a no-brainer because he's just going to continue to see a high level of targets, and he's obviously going to produce with said targets. So Crowder for this game, 8 receptions on 10 targets, 116 yards, and a touchdown. The Jets, again, fall to 0-5, and the Cardinals find a way to bounce back after the little slide there. They improved to 3-2. So let's talk about it, right? We got a lot of things to talk about. There's a few game notes here that I think are really important. The big story here, though, is Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds. This is the thing that I was saying going into the game. It's the number one thing I was going to watch for, and just trying to get a really good understanding of what is actually taking place here with the Arizona Cardinals backfield. I said going into the week, if Kenyon Drake couldn't get it done against the Jets, I don't know when you could confidently start him. Luckily, he did fall into the end zone, and he did finish the day with 12.7 fantasy points in half-point formats, so that's fine. Obviously, it's not world-burning by any means, but it's still a fine game. And the big thing here is the volume for Kenyon Drake is still there. He's just not producing. But even, here's the thing, right? He's still not producing, but he still had multiple games this year with over 4 yards per carry. He's had a game this year with 3.8, which obviously 4 is the standard, so that is a dip below. In this game, it was 3.3, but he's still getting the opportunity. 18 carries. He is still top 5 in the NFL in rushing attempts. So for me, I'm still with it. I'm still with it, and maybe that's just me being blind and my love for Kenyon Drake. But even still beyond that, the snap percentage is still there. A big point of discussion going into the week was, oh, we're really going to see what happens with Chase Edmonds if they utilize him more or less this week, if they shift more to Kenyon Drake and they try and get him going. He still saw 66% of snaps. Like, he is still the bell cow running back for this team. The only difference still is that the receiving work isn't there. And obviously, with a guy like Kenyon Drake, who does have that in his skill set, and we saw that last year, it's one of the things that made him such a great running back. If he doesn't have that, that is going to be a major hit to his value. So Chase Edmonds comes in, scores a touchdown, only gets 3 carries. Like, that's really important. And on one of those carries, he did break off, the long touchdown run. So that's obviously going to inflate things. But you look at Chase Edmonds' carry counts, and it's 3-3. It's 3-3-4-3. So this is still Kenyon Drake's backfield in that respect. The difference with Chase Edmonds is the receiving work. This is now back-to-back games where he has seen 6 targets, caught 5 of them in both games, and was able to find his way to the end zone in one of those off the receiving work. So I'm still going to be here on Kenyon Drake. My expectations are going to be lower, but I'm still in a place where I'm fine starting him. Obviously, you would like to see him continue to make his way into the end zone. His upcoming schedule is pretty nice with Dallas and Seattle, then a bye week coming off the bye. It's then Miami, Buffalo, Seattle again. And obviously, as I talked about before, Buffalo's defense is more so predicated upon shutting down receivers than it is the running back. They'll let you beat you in that way. So he's got a few favorable matchups over the course of the next 5 weeks. Kenyon Drake is probably still going to be my lineup. Again, I am a Kenyon Drake guy, and so this might just me going down with the ship. But I understand why you want to get off him. I'm just not ready to do it yet. He was able to get into the end zone, like I said. If he wasn't able to get it done versus the Jets, then I'd be probably completely off. But he did. He looked fine. I'm still gonna stay afloat, stay on board, but I'm going to lower my expectations just a little bit. DeAndre Hopkins, holy shit. The question going into this year was, what level of target share is he going to get? Over the course of his career in Houston, he was consistently at 25, 26, 27%. And where he fell in line with this going over to the Cardinals with obviously Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald and Andy Isabella, they just had a lot of pieces there, so we weren't sure what this would look like. Oh yeah, this is DeAndre Hopkins' team. They took everything he was in Houston and just threw it into Arizona. He looks really, really good. He's been consistently producing at a high level still. And if you have DeAndre Hopkins, you got to be feeling really good about taking that gamble that you did in the draft, because there was a lot of concerns about what his value would actually be this season on a new team in a wacky offseason. So to see him thrive and be successful is pretty cool. Moving over to the Jets, I'm not going to spend any time talking about Joe Flacco. I honestly don't really care. But I will say this in regards to him, and this more so ties to Le'Veon Bell than anything else. I was going through Le'Veon Bell's game log from last year because he's a guy who I'm actually really interested in trying to acquire at this current point in time, and the numbers were great. If you look at Le'Veon Bell's game logs, yes, there were a few dud games as well, but in half-point formats, he was consistently putting up, let me pull this up one more time. In half-point formats, he was consistently putting up anywhere between 11 and 16 fantasy points per week. He was really solid, really consistent in that way. Definitely not a running back one, but he is a very great and very secure running back too. So he is a guy who I've been looking into trying to acquire in multiple leagues. But he actually did decline his media availability after the game, and the speculation is because of the fact that, one, they got killed, and obviously the Jets being 0-5, obviously there's going to be some issues there, especially surrounding the head coach, Adam Gase. But number two, and more importantly, he only saw 1 target in this game, in a game where they were trailing pretty big throughout the majority of it. You look at his stuff from last year, he was consistently seeing anywhere between 5 to 10 targets a game. And just to see that receiving work just magically disappear, and like I said, maybe that is a Joe Flacco thing more than anything else. I have to actually go back through the numbers and look to see what Flacco's history is checking down to running backs. But regardless, I think Sam Darnold's going to be back, if not this week, then next. And so those numbers for Le'Veon Bell's receiving work should go up yet again. I think this is honestly just a one-game fluke. 13 carries for 60 yards. Fine with it. Looked pretty good in that respect. I'm all in and trying to acquire Le'Veon Bell. He's a guy who I think you can still get pretty cheap in your leagues. And then finally, Jamison Crowder. Again, just start him every week. He is I talked about this going into the year. Jamison Crowder is the safest PPR wide receiver in probably all of football, at least outside. It's right as of right now, he is wide receiver 22 in PPR formats. So I guess what I mean by that is, because obviously, Michael Thomas is super safe, or Keenan Allen, right? But anybody outside of the top 12, Jamison Crowder is the safest PPR option in fantasy football. It's been like this for years, especially with his past few seasons with the Jets. It's been this way. And he was a guy who I said you need to be gunning for in your drafts. And again, 10 you just go through the targets, right? And yes, he did miss a few games with a hamstring injury, but just through the first 3 games that he's actually played, 13 targets, 10 targets, 10 targets. He's just an absolute monster. And especially because of the state of this Jets wide receiving core, he is going to be the focal point and the feature point of this offense. All right, let's switch games now real quick, shall we? Let's go over to Carolina and Atlanta. This also was another great game as well. The Panthers improved to 3-2 on the season, defeating the Falcons by a final score of 23-16. The Falcons moved to 0-5, and they end up firing head coach Dan Quinn and their GM after this game. So a new era is going to be ushered into Atlanta in just a bit. Raheem Morris, their defensive coordinator, is going to be taking over as head coach during this time. But the Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater, Bridgewater is here now, and I'm going to talk about him in just a moment as well. But Teddy Two Gloves, 27 of 37, 313 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Mike Davis continues to roll in absence of Christian McCaffrey. 16 carries, also caught 9 of 10 targets for 149 total yards and 1 touchdown. DJ Moore, the revival game was here. He had a great touchdown run, 4 of 5 targets for 93 yards and a score. And Robbie Anderson continues to produce at a high level, catching 8 of his 13 targets for 112 yards. And Teddy Bridgewater is just cooking right now. Early on in the season, the only thing that was holding him back was the fact that he wasn't able to find his way into the end zone, and that this is a team that really did struggle in that part of the field. But in the past 3 games, Bridgewater has 6 total touchdowns, and he is absolutely cooking. And this was the thing that I expected Bridgewater to do coming into this season, so it's finally happening, and I'm really excited about that. Moving over to the Falcons, Matt Ryan had a really bad down game this week, completing 21 of 37 pass attempts for 226 yards, and an interception. Todd Gurley continues to get it done, and I'm going to talk about him in just a moment as well. Gurley, 14 carries, 121 yards, caught 4 or 5 passes for an additional 29 yards, and he also got into the end zone as well. And Calvin Ridley continues to ball out this season, catching 8 passes on 10 targets for 136 yards. Julio Jones did not play in this game due to a hamstring injury. All right, let's go. I want to talk about Bridgewater. The numbers admittedly still aren't there. And what I mean by that is the fantasy point totals, right? In a game like this where he was, again, throwing the ball 37 times, completing 27 passes, he still manages to only finish with around 21 fantasy points. And it's very, very bizarre because these are games where he should be able to continue to produce. He's obviously has the weapons to do so, checking down to Mike Davis or Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Curtis Samuel even has stepped up a lot this game, and I thought he played pretty well. So to see this happen, I'm just waiting. I don't know. It's very, very weird, right? Because 21 fantasy points is still great. For whatever reason, I expect more out of him. And I think it really is just the fact that the way that this offense is structured around him, he should easily be able to be a guy who gives you 23 consistently, right? So I'm fine with Bridgewater for the rest of the year. That's my long-winded way of saying that. You look at the upcoming games. He's got Chicago, New Orleans, Atlanta again. Kansas City, Baltimore, Detroit, Minnesota, a bye week. Holy shit. Bridgewater is going to cook. It's going to be nice. It's going to be great. We saw DJ Moore have a great bounce back game, like I said, with him. If you go and get it done this week, that's when I would finally hit the panic button on him. So to see DJ Moore come through and have a sign of life, I know that gave a lot of fantasy managers a sigh of relief. Robbie Anderson continues to do his thing, and Christian McCaffrey should be back. And I actually saw the point being raised again. And it's something that I kind of forgot about for whatever reason. The joke was being made that the Carolina Panthers paid Christian McCaffrey all that money just to have Mike Davis be Christian McCaffrey on a far better contract, right? So having Mike Davis ball out the way that he has is actually unbelievable. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this per se, in the sense of, because we've seen Latavius Murray come in when Alvin Kamara was out, and Murray finishes as the top 5 running back, right? But their styles are very, very different. But what the Panthers did with Mike Davis so far, and this run is probably going to be over relatively soon whenever CMC comes back, but they just printed out a Christian McCaffrey label and stuck it on the shirt of Mike Davis. And they said, you are Christian McCaffrey, your name is Mike Davis, but you are Christian McCaffrey on the field. You look at what Mike Davis has done in the absence, and it's truly absurd. I had the unfortunate luck of facing Mike Davis and Todd Gurley in the same league this week. My opponent had both of them, and I got steamrolled by the two. Mike Davis, as of right now, is currently running back 6, and he did not play the first 2 weeks of the season. It is truly, I shouldn't say that. He did not play the first week of the season. He played in the second week versus Tampa, and that was when CMC left. So he basically played 4.5 weeks, and he is running back 6 on the year. It's truly remarkable what the Panthers offense has done without CMC and utilizing Mike Davis in a way that is truly, truly remarkable. I love the Panthers going forward. I've talked about this before. They are my favorite team. I got my hoodie over there. So this is like, to see these things happen, especially for fantasy relevance. It makes me really happy, because that just means I get to talk about my favorite team a lot, because they have a lot of players who I get to talk about, and I get to tell you if you should start them or sit them and things of that nature. Let's see. All right, let's go over the Falcons now. I think I've talked about the Panthers enough here. Matt Ryan, we are in an interesting point with him, where he has now given you 3 trash games in a row. And that is very bizarre. Obviously, Julio being out is a big part of that. But even still, he's had Calvin Ridley. He's had Hayden Hurst, who unfortunately we have to talk about, RIP. Russell Gage. And so these weapons he still has. And for whatever reason, Ryan just hasn't been able to get it done. I know that there is this... I know that there is a trend with Ryan going over through... Can I look at this? Yes, there we go. There's a trend with Matt Ryan where he'll have one really great fantasy season and the next one's a down year, and then it goes back up and the next one's a down. But even that being said, he was actually... this was supposed to be the up year for him. I dropped my pen. This was supposed to be the up year for him, and it just hasn't happened. Obviously, he had the 2 really great games to kick off the season versus Atlanta and Dallas, but since then, and these numbers are actually a bit inflated by about 2 or 3 points based upon my own league scoring, so just take that into consideration here. 13 points, 15, and 8, so he has not been good, and in the quarterback position where you know you're facing teams who are going to put up 25 at that position, you can't afford to have dud games like that. I have a lot of concerns for Matt Ryan going forward. But a player who I do not have concerns about going forward, there's 2 of them. It's Todd Gurley and it's Calvin Ridley. I'm going to smash these 2 together. Calvin Ridley, it's pretty simple. He is the wide receiver 1 on this team as currently stands. I do not care about Julio Jones. That is something that I got wrong this offseason. There was obviously a ton of buzz about Ridley this year, and I said that I think I had Ridley coming in as my wide receiver 14 or 15 for the year, and I felt like I really did feel like we were gassing up Calvin Ridley too much. But, he's come through. He's produced at extremely high levels, extremely consistent. Even this week versus Carolina, the whole first half, he was an absolute dud. Even a dud for the majority of the third quarter, and absolutely turned it up during the last 20 minutes of this game. And he came through with a great performance yet again for you. But I want to talk about Todd Gurley. I talked about Gurley, I think, in my game preview for this game. And I was basically saying you need to keep Todd Gurley. There is a lot of chatter about Gurley and what you should do with him. And if you can sell high and you can get a great value in return, I guess do it. But here's the thing that you need to understand, and that's Todd Gurley's schedule before the bye week. He plays Minnesota next week. He then plays Detroit, Carolina again, and then Denver. And Denver's run defense is fine. It is what it is, but still, they're beatable in that way. He has another set of 3 great matchups. At 3, maybe 4, right? I'm really excited for Gurley going forward. He's a guy who he's just been able to consistently find his way into the end zone. Again, this offense still, even despite Matt Ryan's struggles on paper, they still move the ball at a good enough rate to get those end zone and inside the 5 opportunities for Gurley, and he was running effectively really well yesterday against the bad Carolina Panthers defense, and he faces them again in just 3 weeks. The other bright side for me in this game was that he was actually involved in the passing game, and that's something that I really want to see going forward with this new coaching change. I hope that they get him more involved. For the first time since week 1, he had 5 targets in this game, so I'm really encouraged by that. That was the one thing I felt like was holding him back. But he's here. Even if he is still seeing only 57% of the snaps, he's producing at a monster level, and he is still talented enough to get it done. I'm in on Gurley for a minimum the next 3 or 4 weeks. And then after that, the schedule gets a little bit rocky, but he actually does face the Raiders in Week 12, and we know what running backs do to them. And then finally, we need to talk about Hayden Hurst, and it's official. Hayden Hurst is 400% droppable. It's done. The experiment is over. It's not worth it any longer. From what we've seen from Hayden Hurst, it's been abysmal. It's been 6 points, 7 points, and 1.1. There was also even a 5.3 game thrown in there. The only game that really saved him was that 5 for 72 in one game versus Dallas, where he did catch that long touchdown in the second quarter. It just hasn't been good. It just hasn't been good for Hayden Hurst. And actually, the only reason why he actually put up that 6.6 game versus Chicago is because he had that 1-yard touchdown, which obviously inflated his overall production. As currently stands, I'm not thrilled about Hayden Hurst. I do think he's droppable. It obviously depends on who is on your tight end waiver wire. Admittedly, I held on to Hurst too long, and I'm in a bit of a desperation mode right now. So we'll see what happens there. I'll probably give you guys an update or just give some names throughout the week who you can consider. But at this point, Hayden Hurst, it seems like bust is written all over him. And that makes me sad because he was a guy who I hyped up a lot this offseason. All right, let's move on to the next game, shall we? And that is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. And let's just move over here. So the Ravens slashed the Bengals by a final score of 27-3. Making the Bengals fall to 1-3-1. The Ravens bump up to 4-1 atop the division. Actually, the Steelers by win percentage are still one spot higher than them. But the Bengals, Joe Burrow, 19 of 30 for 183 yards and an interception. Joe Mixon, I want to talk about him in this video. 24 carries, 6 of 8 through the air, and 94 total yards. T. Higgins continues to impress, catching 4 passes on 8 targets for 62 yards. And Tyler Boyd came through for a shallow game of 6 targets, 4 receptions for 42 yards. A.J. Green left this game in the second quarter with a hamstring injury, unsurprisingly. On the other side, with Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, Jackson had a pretty bad game, all things considered. This was something where he should have absolutely lit up the Bengals. He completed 19 of 37 attempts for 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a really bad interception. Hollywood Brown hauled in 6 of 10 targets for 77 yards and a score. And Mark Andrews did his thing, catching 6 passes on 9 targets for 56 yards and a touchdown. Lamar Jackson only had 2 carries in this game. It was a bit absurd, all things considered. So let's talk about Joe Mixon, because he's actually the big story here for me. And I tweeted this yesterday during the game. Joe Mixon is matchup proof. I'm sorry. I understand that he's busted before and during the early parts of the year, and he's made a lot of fantasy managers very, very angry and very upset. But Joe Mixon is matchup proof. And the reason why is because regardless of what happens, he is still going to get the ball 20 plus times a game. And that is a volume that you cannot buy. It is like they were getting smoked. It was a shutout. It was 20-0. They were getting smoked, and he is still just getting the ball left, right, and center, up the middle to the outside. Heavily involved in the passing game now for back-to-back weeks, which is the big improvement for him. That they just realized, this team literally just realized, hey, Joe Mixon is 3 times better than Gio Bernard. Let's give him the ball more. So that's where we're at. I'm not concerned about Joe Mixon at all going forward. Neither should you. Yes, the schedule is still a bit rocky before the bye week, but I don't care. When you're getting the ball in this game a literal 30 times between carries and catches, how do you sit him from your lineup? Are you insane? And he obviously is a talent to take any one of those to the house on any given play. Joe Mixon is in your lineup every single week. I don't want to hear anything otherwise. He is an absolute great running back in the NFL. T. Higgins is here. This is now the fourth straight week where I've said T. Higgins is here. It's official. Like we're dead. Like AJ Green, and this is also an AJ Green take. AJ Green is dead. He is gone. Drop him. Find somebody else off the waiver wire. There's a lot of waiver wire gold during the current point of this NFL season, where you might be able to drop AJ Green for T. Higgins if he's still available, right? Please just do that. Just literally do the same thing that the Bengals did and pass the torch from one wide receiver to the other. T. Higgins is here. It's actually his 4th straight game with 6+ targets. It's his 3rd straight game with 7+. He's just being heavily involved, heavily targeted, and this was what I was saying about T. Higgins all offseason long, which was whenever a team drafts a rookie quarterback and a rookie wide receiver in the same draft, let alone one round apart, right? T. Higgins was an early 2nd-round pick, and Burrow obviously being the 1st pick in the draft. That usually means that the plan is to stack these two for the next 10 years, right? And with that being said, it's just a continuously budding chemistry. Higgins again, I believe, led the Bengals in snap percentage at the wide receiver position. This is just what it is going forward. It's T. Higgins as the number 1 option for this team. Maybe 1A, 1B with Tyler Boyd, depending on how you cut that, because Boyd is still an excellent receiver, and Boyd is still being heavily targeted as well. I guess I should say that Higgins is the number 1 receiver on the outside, and obviously Boyd does the majority of his work in the slot as well. I'm not worried about Boyd going forward. This was a really tough matchup against the Bengals, all things considered. Moving over, this was a really tough matchup against the Ravens, all things considered. Speaking of the Ravens and moving over to them, Lamar Jackson, I'm getting frustrated, and I'm sure you guys are too. My stake in Lamar Jackson isn't the fact that I drafted him in the 2nd or 3rd round of a league. It's the stake that I have him as my dynasty quarterback, and granted, I did get him in the 21st round of my startup draft 2 years ago. But I guess that's the point, right? Even if you did draft him in that 2nd or 3rd round where you have more on the line, it doesn't take a rocket science to look at this Ravens offense so far during the early parts of this year, and this shit's broken. It doesn't look good. It looks stagnant. Lamar is missing throws that he normally is able to make. There's obviously a lot of criticism about his passing ability. I don't give a fuck. He's demonstrated time and time again he can be a great passer in the league. But just to see this offense that looked like such a juggernaut last year just come to a screeching halt is really mesmerizing. It's head-scratching, it's dumbfounding, and it just doesn't make sense, especially when you look at what Kansas City's still doing, and they're still fucking cooking with fire over there. So to see the Ravens continue to struggle, it's a bit... I'm not fully concerned, but I'm just trying to figure out what the fuck happened. Lamar Jackson in this game had 2 carries, like I said. 2 carries for 3 yards. That is not supposed to happen, right? The reason why we love Lamar is because of the fact of what he can do on the ground with his legs. So to see him not even get the work, it's that confusing, right? And there was obviously the notion of we're going to pass more. And granted, they did in this game. He had 37 pass attempts. But he only completed 19 of them for 180 yards and a score. So if you're going to take away the rushing ability, right, then you better be able to take that and transfer that over to the air game. And it just hasn't yet. You look at what he's done so far in the passing attack. It's 204 yards, 97 yards passing, 193, and then 180. So he's even struggling to get over 200 at this point. And, last year, if that was the case, obviously, the difference is that he was such a threat on the ground where it was a lot of reads and a lot of draws, a lot of quarterback options, things like that. But, the issue is that you're taking away from the strength and you're not applying it to the other aspect of his game. And that's just something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, all things considered. I'm not going to trade Lamar or anything like that because Lamar Jackson's still a fucking superstar in the NFL and better days are ahead. I'm just trying to figure out what the fuck is going on now with this Ravens offense. Speaking of, the three-headed monster between J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram, and Gus Edwards is still an absolute nightmare. You can't trust any of them. Mark Ingram finally surpassed 10 carries. He had 11 for 57 yards. And the reason why I didn't include any of them in the box score is just because nobody stood out. Nobody did anything important. The snap percentages are still 35. They're still 35, 35, 25. It doesn't matter. There's no way to indicate who's going to play well. And regardless, between the three of them, if they're all getting 30% of the work, what are you supposed to do in that scenario? My best advice now at this point is you need to cut bait. I'm fine selling. J.K. Dobbins is droppable. Gus Edwards is droppable. And Mark Ingram, I'd look to trade off name value, at least try and get something back in return. Don't go crazy. Try and make some absurd offer. Take some offer to receive for him because it's not going to work and you're just going to get pretty frustrated. Understand his worth. You can probably get a wide receiver 3 for him for a team that is needy at the running back position. Or even if you want to try and find an upgrade, maybe you trade Mark Ingram for Leonard Fournette in the hopes that Fournette takes over. Or maybe you try and get a Justin Jackson for Mark Ingram with Austin Eckler being out for the next handful of games with that hamstring injury. Just a lot of things that you can try and do. I don't know the market for Mark Ingram, but I'd at least try and trade him before you actually cut bait with him. Hollywood Brown, I want to talk about him for just a moment. This is the big sad story for me. I tried to trade for Hollywood this week before this game. I knew he was probably going to break out this game. He's got Philadelphia next week, and then a bye week. But there was a lot of hype with Brown coming into this offseason and him taking the next step. And he hadn't really done it yet, all things considered, but this matchup versus Cincinnati was just so prime for him to do it. I tried to get him this week, and of course I got the classic, let me see how he does this week before I make my decision. And of fucking course, Hollywood gets 10 targets, hauls in 6 of them for 77 yards, and a touchdown. It's an unfortunate situation for me. I don't think the deal is dead by any means, but it's obviously going to be a much steeper climb in order to get Hollywood because I do feel like I'm a wide receiver away and I would love to have him on my team. But just stay the course with Hollywood. Like I said, Philadelphia next week. That's a pretty good matchup. We'll see if Darius Slay is on him, and then the bye week. But Hollywood for the rest of the season should be a fine start if you need to, right? I mean, Hollywood has never really been the guy where he's your number 2 wide receiver. He's typically your number 3 or number 4, who you're fine starting any given week, and it looks like that's probably going to be the trend going forward. Anything else from this game? Mark Andrews, good to do Mark Andrews things. I'm not concerned about him in the slightest. Had a touchdown and 57 yards after a bounce-back game, right? Last week he dudded. No, that was 2 weeks ago he dudded against Kansas City. My bad, yeah. Mark Andrews, top three tight end, just going forward. He's a touchdown machine. And I said this actually on Twitter yesterday. There are two, there has to be two. There are 2 stacks in fantasy that are the best. Number 1 is Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and number 2 is Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. And the reason why it's not a Breeze and Kamara, and the reason why it's not Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, which is another stack that I love, I've talked about that time and time again. The reason why it's the 2 quarterbacks and the 2 tight ends, it's because they are both positional game breakers, right? Lamar Jackson and Mahomes are a quarterback cheat code. They are players who can get you 30 plus on any given week. They can explode. They can win you weeks. And the same goes for their tight ends. And tight end, obviously, the landscape for a tight end, you got your top 3, then everybody else, right? And so the fact that you can have that stack with these 2 game-breaking quarterbacks and these 2 game-breaking tight ends, it's magic. It really, really is. And the fact that I have that in a dynasty league, oh my god, it makes my life so much easier because I know, set it, forget it, don't worry about the rest, only focus on the other 8 players that you're starting on the week. But that's going to do it for this game recap. Let's move over to the next game, shall we? And let's talk about the Colts and the Browns, okay? The Cleveland Browns are 4-1. What a world are we in? Where's my thing at? There we go. The Browns improved to 4-1, defeating the Colts by a final score of 32-23. Phillip Rivers and the Colts continue to struggle in the passing game. 21 of 33 for 243 yards and 2 interceptions. Jonathan Taylor, 12 carries, 57 yards, and a touchdown. T.Y. Hilton, welcome back from the dead, my man. Appreciate you coming around for the 2020 NFL season. Welcome aboard, just a few weeks late. 10 targets, 6 receptions for 69 yards. Jonathan Taylor, another top 15 running back finish. I'll talk about him in just a moment. On the other side with the Browns and Baker Mayfield, who was dinged up in this game with a rib injury, played through it. X-rays came back, were negative. Mayfield, 21 of 37 for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Kareem Hunt without Nick Chubb, again, top 5 running back, bar none. 20 carries, 93 total yards, and a touchdown. And Jarvis Landry had a pretty good game as well. Of course, the week after I say that I'm really concerned about Landry, he comes through and plays decently well for you if you had to start him, hauling in 4 of 9 targets for 88 yards. Austin Hooper, I want to talk about him. 17 targets the past 2 games after dudding essentially for the first 3 weeks of the season. He's really come on strong as the year has progressed, and it looks like that there is budding chemistry between Baker Mayfield and Hooper. But again, one of the things that we really look for at the tight end position is volume, and if he is going to see a consistent target share now at this point, between 7 targets in week 4 and 10 this week versus the Colts, that's volume that you can probably count on going forward. So I'm really excited for Hooper in that way. I want to see if it's going to keep up as the year progresses. All right, let's go back to camera here. I'm going to talk about Jonathan Taylor first because I really don't have a whole lot to say about the Colts' other offensive pieces here. I don't know if it's just what I'm seeing, but I've continuously seen people panic about Jonathan Taylor, right? When Marlon Mack went down, the anticipation was Jonathan Taylor's a top 5 running back. Like, this is it, right? And maybe, admittedly, that was a bit too ambitious, right? But Jonathan Taylor still seeing 50% of snaps because of Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins. He's still getting it done. And I'm going to have to say this probably every week now going forward. I know I've talked about this before in the past as well. Again, this is a floor game for Jonathan Taylor of 12 carries, 57 yards, 2 receptions for 17 yards, and a touchdown. This is a floor game for Jonathan Taylor. I'm gonna say this again. A floor game for Jonathan Taylor. He finished this week again as a top 15 running back. He is running back 13 on the year, and he has not had a boom game yet. He's had maybe one versus Minnesota where he scored 18 points. But outside of that, it's been a consistent 12 points a week, and that's fine. That is fine for a guy that you drafted in that 4th, 5th round this season, and he's obviously a rookie, and he's only going to get better as the year progresses. But if you're a Jonathan Taylor owner, I don't know how you can be anything other than happy. You just have such a consistent option where you know you'll end up getting 64 yards, fall into the end zone once, and you'll be fine. You'll be set with a 12-point game every single week, right? I'm really excited just about Taylor going forward on the year, and I actually think he fits in the same category as Clyde Edwards-Helaire of just 2 running backs where the expectations were so high. And even though they aren't at their expectations, they're maybe a step and a half below, which means you are able to try and get Jonathan Taylor or Clyde Edwards-Helaire for cheap. I want to talk about Clyde in just a little bit when we talk about the Chiefs and the Raiders. But you're just in a position where I try and make an offer for Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire almost immediately. These are 2 guys who are playing at their floor right now, and their ceiling and their potential haven't even been touched, or we haven't even scratched the surface of them. Moving over to the rest of the Colts, Phillip Rivers, you're done. You weren't starting him anyway, hopefully. You should officially be done after this. They just don't look good. They don't move the ball consistently, and if they do, it's just little baby plays. It's nothing big. Rivers had a few really bad interceptions and just bad throws in general in this game. It's nice to see T.Y. Hilton come back and have a fine performance, but I still don't think you're excited to start him, or you're really even willing to start him going forward. 10 targets, though, that's really hard to scoff at. That's easily the most on the year. He actually had 9 targets in Week 1 versus Jacksonville, but it's been 5-5-5 ever since then. I'm still off T.Y. for now. I just don't trust it. I just don't trust it, and as we approach this bye week season and the COVID season and just the reshuffling of games here, flexibility is important. So if you need to play T.Y., you can at any given point. But just understanding where he falls in terms of your wide receivers, right? So for example, if you have Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, and T.Y. Hilton, you need to order those guys in a way that makes sense. Kind of like how we do tiering in the pre-draft process. Like your tier of running backs, your second tier, your third, right? You need to do that with your roster, and you need to look at who are my top tier wide receivers, who's my second tier. I consider those guys as replacements, so for bye weeks, right? Let's just say for Robert Woods, you're starting him every single week. Well, when Robert Woods is on a bye, who am I playing in place of him? So just things like that, and really understanding the landscape of your roster and what is the situation of when you're actually going to play T.Y. Hilton. I started Mo Alley-Cox this week because I had to. I wasn't comfortable starting Hayden Hurst, and I had Robert Tonyan last week, who was on a bye this week with the Packers. So I had to start Mo Alley-Cox, and Mo Alley-Cox put up a 0. Trey Burton was heavily involved, but he did nothing, and Jack Doyle was non-existent. Just please stay away from the Colts outside of Jonathan Taylor and Ricardo Blankenship, who proves again to be one of the best kickers in the NFL. The rookie, the goggles, the safety goggles. He's the number 2 kicker on the year. He's balling out, and this is what I look for in kickers. I know I don't talk about kickers hardly at all on this channel or on this show. But the thing I always look at for kickers is give me offenses that are good enough to move the ball but aren't good enough to score. And that is the Indianapolis Colts in a nutshell. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars in a nutshell. It's, what's another team? It is the San Francisco 49ers in a nutshell. And that one's obviously a little bit different because they do have some star players with Mostert and Kittle and things like that. But that is a team that is going to consistently move the ball to the 30 or 35-yard line, maybe not be able to punch it in, and then they settle for field goals. And that's where you're going to rack up all their points. Michael Badgley of the Chargers is a great candidate. He's one of my kickers for that reason. So Blankenship and Jonathan Taylor for the Colts moving forward. Going over to the Browns, not a whole lot that I want to talk about in this game. Mayfield was fine. Again, you're never really going to start him. He just doesn't have that ceiling to where he's going to explode on any given week, and even then his floor is pretty low as well because of the fact this team is so run heavy. Kareem Hunt, speaking of, balled out, coming in with 16.8 fantasy points in half-point formats. You would love to see that number be a bit higher, admittedly, but they did have some other players involved. Dearness Johnson came in, got 8 carries, also had a target in the receiving game as well. I'm fine with Kareem Hunt. Don't panic. Again, 16.8 fantasy points in week 1 without Chubb. Just keep starting him, keep the train moving, and you'll be all right. With Landry, it's actually this was actually really interesting trying to decide who I wanted to put in the box score of this game because Jarvis Landry was involved. He had 10 plus fantasy points. Rashad Higgins, who whenever Rashad Higgins is on the field and actually gets work, he's always been a guy who just produces, and he's more so he's a better football player than a fantasy player. And you never know when the Rashad Higgins games are actually going to come. But he's a guy who absolutely deserves more playing time because every time he is on the field, he is spectacular. He comes in with 10 plus fantasy points, and Odell comes in with 9.1. And this is just this is just the Odell Beckham experience. And I told you to start Odell. I did. So that's on me. I bought the dip and I bought the hype after the Cowboys game. But again, 9 targets, hauls in 5 of them for 58 yards. The targets. The volume is there, just the production isn't. And what can you do at that point? And I guess the question for me is if Odell Beckham isn't a weekly start, then what is he? Is he a dart throw? Is he a swing for the fence? Is he just a supplement? Is he matchup dependent? Right, there's a lot of questions here surrounding Odell and what he actually is and what he can be for fantasy. And so, for example, next week versus Pittsburgh, do you play Odell in that matchup? Because we've now seen games versus good defenses with Baltimore, Washington, and Indianapolis now where he's had under 10 fantasy points in those contents. And then the games versus really bad defenses being Cincinnati and Dallas, he's put up double digits, 15 plus in both those matchups. So if it's next week versus Pittsburgh, I don't think you can play Odell. And I think that's just kind of the route that we take is Odell Beckham is now matchup dependent if he's in your lineup or if he isn't. We talked about Austin Hooper already. That was a great catch. We talked about Austin Hooper already. 5 receptions, 10 targets. Just being more and more involved in this passing game, and that's great for him. And it's also great for the tight end landscape, which is currently bleeding at all levels and at all places right now. So to just have another guy who can serve some sort of relevant role, that has to be intriguing and exciting for somebody going forward. If you are the Zach Ertz owner, if you are the Hayden Hurst owner, if you are the Tyler Higbee owner, which are all players who have basically just gone from here to here in just a matter of a few weeks. All right. Let's move over to this next game, and that is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. There we go. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. The Texans get their first win of the season, defeating Jacksonville by a final score of 30-14. Both teams now are 1-4. Gardner Minshew. Minshew does it again. I've only been screaming this now for 3 months. How long have I been doing this? August, September. We're in October now. I started halfway in July, so basically 3 months now at this point. Gardner Minshew is an incredible fantasy option for you. He's going to get it done, and it really is just a matter of trusting him to do it. Right, that's the big thing. Starting Gardner Minshew, you're never going to feel great about it, but when the results are a consistent 20-plus fantasy points, what else can you do? So Minshew, 31 of 49 passing, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a fumble. James Robinson came down to earth finally, 13 carries, caught 5 of 7 targets for 70 yards. Also had a really, really bad fumble on 4th and 1 in the fourth quarter. And Laviska Shenault steps up yet again. 7 receptions on 8 targets for 79 yards. And DJ Chark left the game in the fourth quarter due to an ankle injury, but even before the injury, DJ Chark was non-existent, and he's a guy who I have steady concerns over yet again, or actually finally, should I say, because I held out on hitting the red button on Chark for as long as I could. More on him in just a little bit. For the other side, though, the Texans in their first game without Bill O'Brien, they improved to 1-0 without B.O.B. Deshaun Watson let loose 25 of 35 for 359 yards, 2 interceptions, but he also was able to find the end zone 3 times. David Johnson, 17 carries, 96 yards, and Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks both balled out. Fuller got in the end zone, also caught 4 of 8 targets for 58 yards, and Brandon Cooks, welcome back from the dead. Cooks, 12 targets, 8 receptions for 161 yards, and 1 touchdown. So let's go back to my camera. Where are we at? There we go. Let's talk about this. With Minshew, again, I really do want to reiterate just how great Minshew has been this season. Gardner Minshew is currently QB 12. He is a quarterback 1, and that's, woo! Let's go. Minshew is just a great option if you have a Carson Wentz, if you have a Matt Ryan, or you have another struggling quarterback, maybe a Jared Goff, just because of Goff's inconsistencies. There really is just a world where he's going to finish as a top 10 quarterback, and it's because of this team. You look at the games that he's had, and it's just 20 points versus Indianapolis in week 1. 20 points versus Tennessee in week 2. The dud game in week 3, which is going to leave scars. That was a Thursday night game versus Miami. But he comes back off of that with a 20-plus performance versus Cincinnati and another 20-plus game versus Houston. And this is just what he does. The attempts are there. The yardage are there. He has great chemistry with his wide receivers. Keelan Cole, DJ Chark even, who's been struggling. Laviska Shenault's come on. Even the tight ends with Tyler Eifert. And obviously James Robinson in the backfield. This is an offense that can score. We've seen it. They just put up points. Despite that, they're still 1-4. But this is a team that is going to air it out. They're going to chuck it, and they're going to find a way to just put some level of points on the board. It's not world-burning. It's not 35. It's not 40 points a game. But it's a consistent 20, and that's fine. That's great for fantasy purposes. So I'm still all in on Minshew going forward, and it's actually funny because I was trying to consider what I wanted to do with him going forward. I know for a fact Matt Stafford recently hit my waiver wire, and that Stafford is a guy who I love. So I'm going to actually be trying to narrow down that decision between picking up Matt Stafford or continue rolling with Minshew. I believe in both quarterbacks. I think I just like the Lions' offense just a little bit more. I just like having Kenny Golladay, knowing I have him as my number 1 option on the outside every single week with Matt Stafford, and Stafford obviously being the gunslinger that he is. James Robinson, down game, not worried about it. We've seen what he's done throughout the first 4 weeks. There should be nothing that concerns you. Just a fluke game for him. Laviska Shenault, just a guy that you need to consistently just stay on your radar. He might be a waiver wire ad that you need to pick up now. If you have the option, if you have the flexibility, and obviously flexibility is what everything's going to come down to between COVID cases and bye weeks and just the reshuffling of schedules. Everything depends upon whatever level of flexibility that you have for your roster. But again, another game seeing 68% of snaps, 8 targets, 7 receptions. He's literally just, when he is on the field, he is getting looked at, and that can only 68% of snaps can only continue to happen for so long, especially if Chark is going to miss time with his ankle injury, or if he just continues to really just be a letdown, all things considered. Keelan Cole finds his way into the end zone yet again. This is his 3rd touchdown of the year. He is very much touchdown or bust, as we've seen throughout the first 5 weeks, getting into the end zone on 3 different games. In each of those games, he's played pretty well in all things considered. I'm not excited about starting Keelan Cole in any way, shape, or form. I have him on my bench in Dynasty, and it really is one of those things where it's like, am I ever going to play him? What is he for my team? Is he just this in case of emergency player? Is he a bye week play? I think that's really where he really fits into your fantasy lineup, is just with bye weeks coming up quick and fast down the pipe. Keelan Cole might be a fine start there if you have to. And then really just DJ Chark, final point here for the Jags. It's hard. It's hard. I don't know what to make of Chark here. because what we've seen is Chark. He missed week 4. I'm sorry, he missed week 3 due to that ankle injury. But before that, 10 points, 10 points, and 20. I'm sorry, 10 points, 10 points. Misses week 3, comes back week 4, 25. And then again versus Houston, really, really bad game, rough game. 4 targets, 3 receptions for 16 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Doesn't find his way into the end zone. Also leaves the game with an ankle injury. We don't know the severity of that at the time that I'm recording this video. But what do you do with Chark? You're not cutting him, but you also can't start him. I'm very, very concerned about what to do with Chark. He reminds me actually a lot of Odell Beckham at this point. It's what is he for your fantasy team? Where does he rank in your tier of wide receivers? For example, I sat Robert Woods to play DJ Chark this week, and I feel really fucking shitty about it. Because if I were to play Robert Woods like I intended to all week long, and I didn't make that late pivot, I think I made that pivot on either Friday or Saturday night. If I didn't make that late pivot, I'd probably win my matchup this week, all things considered. But unfortunately, it's just the way that it goes. So with Chark, I think you just need to evaluate where he is in terms of your wide receiver core. Is he your 3rd or 4th option? I don't think you can rely on him as your 2nd if that is the case. So I think you need to upgrade from there. But if he's your 3rd or 4th option, I think that's totally fine, and you just need to hang on to him as just a depth piece at this position. Again, he's startable. It's just one of those things where you never really know at this point what level of production you're going to get because the targets just aren't there for whatever reason, even though Minshew's throwing the ball fucking 40 times a game. Moving over to the Texans, Deshaun Watson, I really do just want to give big ups to him. Came through and dominated. It's been a bit of a rocky start for Watson owners, all things considered, based upon where you drafted him. In that 5th, 6th, 7th round territory, he's one of the early quarterbacks that went off the board. And to just see Watson really come through and be able to do things and play aggressive and go downfield and make plays, it really is just encouraging for the Texans offense as a whole moving forward. There was a quote that came out earlier in the week before they played, and Watson was saying that him and Tim Kelly, the offensive coordinator, they just have a great chemistry and they're excited to be able to just continue to evolve and develop the offense in ways that they know that they could post Bill O'Brien. So I'm really they were saying things like they were in this together. So to see Watson come out versus Jacksonville and luckily, I guess, fortunately, unfortunately, depending on how you slice it, the Jags were missing a lot of star players in this game. C.J. Henderson was inactive. Josh Allen was inactive, and so was Myles Jack. So this defense was absolutely shredded, and so this was a game where Deshaun Watson could absolutely torch them. But not only that, even though this defense was weak in that way, just to be able to have a game like this that can give Deshaun Watson and the Texans offense confidence moving forward, I think is really big. I don't care if it's the Jaguars, just being able to have a game like this is really important going forward. David Johnson, you need to play him every single week. This is I've been just banging this drum for David Johnson. He is as consistent of a fantasy running back as you can get. He's not a world burner anymore. Those days are long gone, but he is now in the same kind of territory as Le'Veon Bell, as even Jonathan Taylor, where you're going to get a consistent 10 to 13 fantasy points every single week, and as your number 2 running back, you'll take that. What is wrong with that? We need to learn to find ways to let go of the past, reevaluate, and then proceed with the future and understanding the value that a player actually has for fantasy. And this is David Johnson, right? David Johnson gets traded for, and the Texans give up DeAndre Hopkins, and everyone's saying, well, David Johnson's washed. Was he, though? Because if you look at some of the numbers from Arizona, they really weren't bad. He had that injury that really set him back, and then the team trades for Kenyon Drake, and then he gets out of the rotation trying to come back from the injury, and he was just had a banged-up year, but he started the year as a top 12 running back. He was looking very, very good during the early parts of last season, and here we are now, 18 points, 16, 10, and 11. This is just like production that you're going to get from David Johnson. Again, he's no longer a running back 1, but he is a great and safe running back 2, or even your 3rd running back if you were able to get him in the 5th round if he slid that far in your draft and you already were able to lock up 2 others. He's currently running back 23 In PPR formats, he's even 20 in standard. Just David Johnson. Just keep him in your lineup. He's doing great things for you. Again, for the Texans wide receivers, I need to owe Will Fuller an apology for the fucking fourth time this season. I'm in. I'll say it. I'm officially in on Will Fuller. You have to play him if you have him. He's seeing the targets. He's getting the yardage. He's finding his way into the end zone. Will Fuller, he's here. He's officially the Texans' number one wide receiver. I know Brandon Cooks had a great game as well, and I think Cooks' value long term is actually going to continue to improve. But Will Fuller, he's just done great things for your fantasy team. If you have started him, if you've suffered through the dud in week 2, if you suffered through the hamstring injury in week 4, it's really cool to see Will Fuller, a guy to finally be able to maintain some sort of consistency for fantasy football. And then Brandon Cooks, like I said, 12 targets, 8 receptions. I think this is actually going to be the biggest change for the Houston Texans offense going forward, and that really is just getting Brandon Cooks more involved, getting Brandon Cooks out in space, going deep, throwing, getting big chunk plays. Cooks is still a very, very talented wide receiver. I really just think it's a matter of it just hadn't happened for him. And you also have to remember that he's been now in this point 4 different teams in 6 years. The Saints, the Patriots, the Rams, and now the Texans. So he's just a guy that's really moved around. And I think you can actually make the argument that Deshaun Watson is the best quarterback, at least at this point, that he has played with. He's played with an aging Drew Brees. He's played with an aging Tom Brady. Jared Goff is whatever you make Jared Goff out to be. But I think in terms of just pure talent, Deshaun Watson is the best quarterback that Brandon Cooks has played with. And that has to be really exciting for Brandon Cooks owners if you've been able to hold on this long. And maybe even just look to see if Brandon Cooks is on your waiver wire, just because he really hadn't performed over 3 of the first 4 weeks. So he might be there. He might be a great pickup if he is on your waiver wire. So, all right, let's move over to the next game. That's all I really got for this game, all things considered. Speaking of Jared Goff, we're going to talk about the Rams and the Washington football team next. The Rams slashed Washington by a final score of 30-10. The Rams improved to 4-1. Washington falls to 1-4. And what a really special game this was. Alex Smith comes in for the first time since 2018. Obviously, he had a gruesome injury during that season. There was then complications with his leg post-surgery. It got infected, then almost amputated. They had to take part of his muscle from his left leg and apply it to the right, if I'm not mistaken. Just a lot of chaos happening around him. So to see him be able to come in this game after Kyle Allen gets hit pretty hard, and to actually just be able to play in the NFL was truly, truly special and really one of the best moments of 2020, all things considered. But let's talk about the Rams first. Jared Goff, 21 of 30 for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns, also threw an interception. Darrell Henderson won the Rams running back wheel for the week. 15 carries, 68 total yards, and 2 touchdowns. Robert Woods, 71 yards and a score. And Gerald Everett caught all 4 of his targets for 90 yards. Cam Akers had 9 rushes for 61 yards, and Malcolm Brown had 8 rushes for 30 yards. Again, everyone is going to be involved, but we have no idea who's going to be the lead back on a week-to-week basis. You're playing with fire if you're starting anybody on the Rams. Moving over to Washington, the quarterbacks combined for 18 of 30 for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. It was not pretty. The Rams defense was all over the Washington quarterbacks all games. Washington's offensive line was a disaster, and the Rams, I believe, finished with 6 sacks on the day. Aaron Donald had 4 of them. Best defensive player of all time. Antonio Gibson was on track to have a great game, and he really was looking good early on, especially with Kyle Allen at the helm. Before the injury, Gibson was being heavily targeted in the receiving game. Gibson's final line was 11 carries for 27 yards, 5 of 5 through the air for 24 yards. And then Terry McLaurin had a down game, and this really was just the nature of this contest. The Rams were just all over Washington on both offense and defense. McLaurin, 7 targets, 3 receptions for 26 yards. So just a few things I want to talk about for this game. There's actually not a whole lot, all things considered. I felt like this game was pretty standard, pretty cut and dry. Jared Goff, this was a good Jared Goff game that you got, and this was actually pretty expected. At least I thought. Washington has been a bit shaky on all fronts, as I'm sure you guys know. This was a game where Goff was aligned to have a great game. If you started him, great. If you streamed him, even better. And then moving over to the running backs, just trying to figure out what this is going to look like on a week-to-week basis is just... I don't know how you can do it. I really don't. And I think what's even more frustrating, and maybe this even just falls in line with my whole take of running backs wins you championships. Maybe this was just a thought that I never fully articulated. One of the reasons why I say that running backs win you championships is because, one, there's only 32 starting running back compared to, 68, 92 wide receivers that start every single week. But even with running backs, yes, 32 start, but how many of them are actually valuable? 24, maybe, right? So that's why I like to load up on running backs early, and not only running backs, specifically workhorses, like Kenyon Drake. Obviously, Chase Edmonds is involved, but still, right, getting 18 carries a game. Kenyon Drake, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Zeke, Kamara, CMC, Dalvin Cook, Saquon. Like, there are just so few workhorse running backs who are going to get all the work. And that's why running backs are so valuable. And, like, it's a very, very weird, especially maybe during even, like, this season, right? To see all of the backfields that are fantasy irrelevant. The Rams backfield, yes, there are guys who are playing well. We've seen the Malcolm Brown week. We've seen the Darrell Henderson weeks. But knowing who to start on any given week is impossible. So the Rams backfield is out. The Detroit Lions backfield is an absolute mess with Adrian Peterson, Kerryon Johnson, and DeAndre Swift. The Baltimore Ravens backfield is an absolute mess. So there's three right there that are just a no-go. You can make the argument that we are approaching. No, I'll save that. I disagree with that. I was going to say maybe the San Francisco 49ers between McKinnon and Mostert, but I still think they each serve their own value. So I'm not too concerned about that. Without Saquon, the Giants backfield could have been an absolute disaster trying to decide between Devonta Freeman, Wayne Gallman. I said Wayne Gallman. Wayne Gallman and Dion Lewis. But to actually, the Patriots running backs are an absolute nightmare now, right? Just a lot of teams are just so committee-based. And my fear, this is the long-winded way of me saying, my fear is that the committee model is going to be the future of the NFL. And the reason why is just because there are more good running backs than the NFL can actually keep up with. And I actually think it's going to be a really smart move that teams are going to roster two incredibly talented running backs. You're going to see a lot of 50-50 timeshares, and that's really just going to be a way to keep guys fresh and keep guys active. So the Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, that's going to continue to be a thing. The Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, that's going to be a thing. The Zach Moss and Devin Singletary in Buffalo, that's going to be a thing. I really think that this is going to be a trend that is going to hit every single NFL team at some point. So please enjoy the workhorse running backs while you can, because you can't end up in a situation like either of these teams, actually, now that I think about it, with both of their backfields being absolute messes. Robert Woods, another great game from him. Cooper Kupp, fine performance from him, not too concerned about that. Tyler Higbee, we actually had to talk a little bit about. This is now 3 straight games after the 3-touchdown game versus Philadelphia, where he has been almost a non-factor. It's not looking great for Higbee. Sorry, I had to yawn. I'm not willing to jump ship off Higbee, and the reason why is I really do just think that this offense is too good. This offense is too good. The tight ends are still being involved. I'm not worried about it. Not just yet. The only concerning thing is that the targets still aren't there, and I know I just said the tight ends are involved, but like between the two of them, they're still involved. So as a collective, they are. But just looking like Higbee in a game like this, only had 2 targets, 2 receptions. Like, it's not great. The week before that, 4 targets, 3 receptions. So I'm not ready to jump ship off Higbee yet, but it is something I am considering. I'm walking towards the plank to get rid of Higbee, and if you are in that spot, luckily I am not. But if you are, you need to start looking ahead at who's on your waiver wire and who you can pick up now, maybe even a week out. Just so if you have to make that decision to cut bait with Higbee next week, you already have their replacement on your roster. Moving over to Washington now, Kyle Allen and Alex Smith just got obliterated by this Rams defensive line and Aaron Donald specifically. I didn't think Kyle Allen looked awful. 9 of 13 specifically for him for 74 yards and a touchdown. So that's fine. I've watched Kyle Allen for fucking... How many games did Kyle Allen start last year? 13? No. Yeah, it would have been 13 because Cam played 2 and then Will Greer started 1. So I watched Kyle Allen for 13 games last week. I know exactly what he was, and it was actually really funny. Jordan Rodriguez, who writes for The Athletic and covers the Rams, she covered the Panthers last year, and just reading her tweets about Kyle Allen yesterday, she's like, deja vu, I've seen all this before. That was pretty funny. So Kyle Allen, you're going to get a lot of checkdowns, and that's really good for Antonio Gibson. Like, before Allen left the game, Gibson had 4 targets and 4 receptions. So I really did think, like, Antonio Gibson was on pace to have such a great game. But unfortunately, the Rams defense just obliterated Washington pretty much all game. And nothing was able to actually get rolling. McLaurin had a bust game for you, and he was really the only guy who you were confidently starting this week. And Antonio Gibson for Washington. And this is just the story of Washington every week. It's going to be you're starting Antonio Gibson. And of course, like I just want to say this. Of course, I hold out on actually starting Gibson for 4 straight weeks. Like, I would not. I've said this on here. I wasn't ready to actually go in until I saw it consistently. And then I saw 3 straight games of double-digit points, and I'm like, all right, I'm here, let's go. And then the one week I start him, he duds. So, thanks, Washington. Appreciate you for that. And then McLaurin, you're fine. Like, this is just part of the Terry McLaurin experience, where you are just going to be in a spot where he plays for a bad football team. And this happens to bad football teams as they just get obliterated. And as a result, obviously, their wide receivers, their quarterbacks, their running backs, they're all going to take major fantasy blows. And this was just one of those weeks for Washington. Let's move on to the next game here. And that is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs in an upset for the week. The Raiders got on top early, and honestly, this score makes it look a lot closer than it actually was. The Raiders defeated the Chiefs by a final score of 40-32. The Raiders are 3-2, and the Chiefs are 4-1 now. Las Vegas handing Kansas City their first loss since November of 2019. An absolute electric winning streak that includes a Super Bowl in there. The Raiders, Derek Carr balled out, was the number 1 quarterback on the week. Derek Carr, 22 of 31 for 347 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Josh Jacobs, 23 carries for 77 yards and a touchdown. He looked really good. Henry Ruggs, my baby boy, back with that hamstring injury in his first game, and oh my God. Only 3 targets, caught 2 of them for 118 yards and a touchdown. He had I believe it was like let me do math here. It was like 44-yard catch in the first quarter, or it was either the first or second quarter, and then an absolute electric 74-yard touchdown in the game. Just what you expect Henry Ruggs to do, and that's send him deep. He's going to make great plays down the field, and he really was a spark plug for the Raiders offense in this game. Darren Waller came through again per usual, hauling in 5 of 7 targets for 48 yards and a touchdown. On the other side, with Kansas City, Mahomes, very, very weirdly as well, with Kansas City. Kansas City's offense, for whatever reason, they haven't started to stall in the same way as Baltimore's, but for whatever reason, it just feels a little bit different, and I'm really trying to figure out why that is the case. Because Mahomes, again, did not play well. 22 of 43 for 340 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 being a rushing score, and an interception. Like, of course I say that he didn't play well. Who was the number 1 quarterback on the week? I thought it was Derek Carr. It was not Derek Carr because Patrick Mahomes outplayed him, unless my numbers are just wrong. Quarterbacks? I'm sorry. Derek Carr was the number 5 quarterback on the week, not number 1. I apologize. That's my bad. But back to what I was saying. Let me pull back up my sheet here. But back to what I was saying about the Chiefs here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 10 carries, 3 for 8 through the air for 80 total yards. Tyreek Hill, 6 targets, 3 receptions for 93 yards and a score. And Travis Kelce, 108 yards and a touchdown, catching 8 of 12 targets. Go trade for Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now. This is something that I've said for at this point now 3 weeks, and please just do it. This goes back to what I was saying with Jonathan Taylor. The expectations for these two rookie running backs, especially Clyde, coming in on this Chiefs offense, their expectations were all the way up here, and they've played down here, which has still been fine. Again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is currently running back 12. He has had, if you want to say week 1 versus Houston, where he had almost 20 fantasy points, he's had one great game, should I say. Everything else, though, has been 10 points, 15, and then 9 points this week. There is a window here. Surprisingly, there is still a window here to go trade for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We thought that the window would have been shut this week versus the Raiders, who have been awful against defending the running back position this year. But it just didn't materialize. So please go try and get Clyde, because the storm is coming again. I love how Clyde and Jonathan Taylor, these two rookie running backs who we were all really excited about coming into the season, they both had the same narrative right now, which is they've underperformed due to their expectations, but they're still playing great football and they're still producing for fantasy purposes, and people are disappointed by them. So please go get Clyde, go get Jonathan Taylor, and improve your running back position in your running back room for your fantasy team, because better days are ahead. And even if you are settling for 11 fantasy points every single week, that's still fine for your number 2 running back. All right. Chiefs, are we talking about anything else? Are we talking about anything else here, really? I do want to bring up Sammy Watkins. Left this game with a hamstring injury. Watkins is expected to miss multiple weeks due to this injury, last time I checked. And because of that, Mecole Hardman, Let's get rolling, Mecole. He increased his snap percentage yet again. He was on the field when Watkins was out. He ran more routes than Demarcus Robinson. Mecole Hardman is going to be the number 2 wide receiver during Sammy Watkins' absence, and he is a guy who should be available on your waiver wires, all things considered. He hasn't done a whole lot really over the course of the year to warrant being rostered in redraft leagues. Yes, he had 2 games with back-to-back touchdowns, but the production itself wasn't fully there. He wasn't seeing having targets. The yardage wasn't there. It really was just touchdown or bust for him so far throughout the year. But now he's actually going to get the opportunity to continue to see an increase in snap percentage, continue to run those routes, continue to be targeted by Patrick Mahomes, and of course the deep ball. The Mecole Hardman and Tyreek Hill special is going to live on for the number 2. For the second-year wide receiver, should I say. With Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, you already know. I don't got to say anything else there. But I think that's going to do it for this game. All things considered, a pretty cut and dry game. Actually, I want to go back to the Raiders real quick. I really do. I want to talk about Ruggs just a little bit more. You guys know. I got to talk about my baby boy. I love him. So, foolishly, evidently, I said I wanted to see it from Ruggs before I was confident throwing him back in my lineup. That's why I benched him during this game in Kansas City. And ironically enough, I actually almost considered pulling him into my lineup during, I think it was probably Sunday morning. It would have had to been. During Sunday morning, probably 10 a.m., I'm just looking at it and it's this is a game versus Kansas City. He can easily break through, and if this game gets into a shootout, Ruggs can probably score a touchdown. And I actually had that thought. I'm like, Ruggs is going to get in the end zone in this game. It just makes a whole lot of sense. So, of course, he does. I don't play him. And while I do think it's really cool that I've gotten a ton of messages already saying, I'm putting in Fab to go get Ruggs, or I'm putting a waiver claim on Ruggs, and my response is always welcome to the club. So the only thing that I want to say about Ruggs is that he only had 3 targets, and he played 65% of snaps, like, fine. But I don't know if you can rely on Ruggs the same way that you can with some of these other rookie wide receivers like a T. Higgins, like a Justin Jefferson, simply just because the volume comparatively isn't there. But we saw what Henry Ruggs did to this offense, and that was just game-changing. Game-changing. Just using the speed to go deep, open things up. Carr looked good. Carr looked comfortable throwing to him deep, which is nice. You know, it makes Derek Carr a little bit more aggressive. But really just being able to identify when Ruggs is playable and when he isn't is going to be the challenge. They have their bye week coming up this week, actually. So if you want to pick him up now, go ahead. But you might be able to hold off on another week, all things considered. Coming back, then, he has Tampa Bay, Cleveland, the Chargers, and Denver before he plays Kansas City again. Actually, the thing that's actually really exciting about Ruggs is the back half schedule, like the playoff schedule. Week 12 is Atlanta. Week 13 is the Jets. 14 is the Colts, 15 is the Chargers, and then 16 is the Dolphins. So things do get a little bit better down the stretch, but I really just want to continue to see his development during the course of his rookie season and his role in this Vegas Raiders offense. Let's move on to the next game here, and that is going to be the Dolphins and the Niners, the upset of the week, bar none. I feel like the Dolphins went to San Francisco and fucking rolled the 49ers by a final score of 43-17. Both teams are now 2-3 on the year. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 22 of 28, 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Myles Gaskin, we need to talk about him per usual. I get to talk about my gushing love for him, which makes me really excited. 16 carries, 5 of 5 through the air, 91 total yards, and a touchdown. Was able to get the goal line work because Jordan Howard was a healthy scratch in this game. On the receiving options for the Dolphins, Preston Williams, welcome to 2020. 4 receptions, 5 targets, 106 yards, and a touchdown. Devontae Parker, 2 of 3 targets, 50 yards, and a score. For the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo was back. He played the first half, but he looked utterly abysmal. 7 of 17 for 77 yards and 2 interceptions. He was benched coming out of the locker room at halftime, and C.J. Beathard replaced him. And Garoppolo was benched in part to 2 reasons. It was both the fact that he played bad, but you have to remember he was also coming off that high ankle sprain, and there were actually questions of whether or not he would be able to play in this game. So it looked like that, he gave it a go. Didn't look good, and the team's best option felt like they just needed to pull him at that point. The Dolphins came through and were shredding them already by halftime, and might as well just, there's no need to put Jimmy Garoppolo back out there. Raheem Mostert, 11 carries in his return off of that knee sprain, 3 targets, 3 receptions for 109 total yards, and in the receiving game, Kendrick Bourne, 2 receptions, 4 targets for 30 yards and a touchdown. Deebo Samuel had 8 targets in this game. He was back up to full health. 88% of snaps played. So if you held out on Deebo Samuel and you put him in your IR, if you didn't have an open IR spot but you still held on to him, Deebo Samuel is coming, and that's really exciting. Brandon Ayuk didn't play well, all things considered. Only hauled in 3 catches for 44 yards. And this is just one of those things where even George Kittle had a down week as well. Like I said, the Dolphins came through and just absolutely smacked them from start to finish in this game. Things I want to talk about. I'm not concerned about the 49ers offense moving forward. C.J. Beathard, fine quarterback, not fine enough to where that's the thing. Actually, it was Matthew Berry talked about this earlier. He's like, the gap between Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, and C.J. Beathard, it's not significant enough to really alter your outlook on Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, or George Kittle. So if you were starting them, you're going to start them, and if you weren't, you weren't. It really is it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't move the needle in that way. Talking about the running backs, though, Raheem Mostert comes back, leads the team in carries. Jerick McKinnon, how many snaps did McKinnon play? I'm actually very curious about this. Yeah, so this is actually the big story here is Jerick McKinnon wasn't involved. This is what I was talking about this week when I said you can't play Raheem Mostert or Jerick McKinnon in this matchup. And that sucked. That sucked saying it, and I understood when I said it. I'm like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? This Dolphins defense is bad. You should absolutely be starting them. But no, you shouldn't have. And the reason why is because we didn't know what this 49ers offense was going to look like with the return of Mostert. We didn't know what the snap percentage was going to look like, excuse me. And we didn't know what the usage was going to be. In all honesty. So to see Mostert come back and take over as a lead dog, that's encouraging. Mostert finally start moving forward. But again, you have Jerick McKinnon playing 25% of snaps, only 1 carry, gets 4 targets. When he is on the field, doesn't do anything with them. Starting Jerick McKinnon absolutely killed you this week, and I'm one of those guys where if I got things wrong, I'll tell you I got it wrong. This one I think I got right. Mostert came through, like I said, 13 points. He was fine if you ended up playing him, but if you played McKinnon, or if you played Jeff Wilson, who actually got 4 carries and 27 yards, and you were just trying to decipher and figure out what this 49ers run game was going to be, hopefully you had Mostert. That's all I'm going to say. Hopefully you had Mostert. Speaking of running games, Myles Gaskin, baby. Myles fucking Gaskin. Let's give it back up to him. Another game of 60+% of snaps, 16 carries, also 5 receptions. So literally getting 20+ touches now at this point, almost every single game it feels like. He is the guy here. And that is so exciting because he was another waiver wire. He was another waiver wire ad. The speculation this offseason was it would be Jordan Howard. Again, I'll tell you when I was wrong. This offseason I said you need to go get Jordan Howard, and that quickly realized that was not a good idea. Luckily, Myles Gaskin was completely undrafted everywhere, so I quickly corrected course and was like, you need to go get Myles Gaskin instead. So Gaskin gets the goal line work with Jordan Howard being a healthy scratch. In fact, I think, can I, let me just look at Vulture. There was a tweet that came out earlier regarding Jordan Howard's contract situation. Let me see. Give me 1 second here. How often does he tweet? Does he tweet a lot? Can I easily find this? One more second. Come on. Evidently not. Okay, but I basically saw this tweet that said that Jordan Howard's contract is basically non-guaranteed, and they have an out after this year. It was a 2-year deal, which I already knew. And so basically what this means is with Jordan Howard being a healthy scratch, they lose nothing by it. And so this is absolutely going to be Myles Gaskin's team and his job going forward. It's officially Myles Gaskin's season. I've only been saying it for the past 4 weeks. We're here. We are officially here. Hopefully you were able to go pick him up off your waiver wire a few weeks ago, because if you have, you got a top 24 running back on your hands. Myles Gaskin is currently number 15 in PPR formats. He's actually 17. That can't be, no, I'm sorry, he's 27 in standard league, so there's a lot more value in PPR formats because he is that pass-catching running back as well. He's a 3-down back, guys. And yes, Matt Breida is involved. I'm not too concerned about it because he's still getting, he's still getting 20-plus touches every single game. Devontae Parker, auto start every single week. Mike Gesicki, we need to talk about him. He actually played well this game. 5 receptions for 91 yards. He finally came through for you. Preston Williams came through in a big way as well. These are just 2 guys where you have to make decisions on, all things considered. Preston Williams is a deep bench stash. In my opinion, I don't know if you're ever confident fully starting him in a week. But with bye weeks, injuries, and COVID, there are weeks where maybe you have to, and you have to again. Even myself, myself and other people, I've seen the tweets of I've had to start X player in a matchup this week. If it weren't for Raheem Mostert coming back, I know somebody would have had to start Gus Edwards as their running back too. Things are this dire right now in the fantasy football landscape that sometimes you got to bite the bullet and you got to start who you gotta just in order to fill a roster. For example, I know somebody, and it was actually somebody in my dynasty league who had to start. Let's pull this up here. I know somebody who had to start Matt Breida and Jordan Wilkins at the running back position because Melvin Gordon and Damian Harris had their games postponed. Like, we are in just a time where you need to be flexible. You have to have depth to your roster, and you have to have guys who you are comfortable starting on any given week. And maybe Preston Williams actually does fit that mold. But going back to Mike Gesicki, Mike Gesicki actually only played 43% of snaps in this game. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to do with him. I really, really don't. Didn't find his way into the end zone. I just don't think you can rely on Gesicki week in, week out. He's not the tight end option that we all thought he would be. But it is nice to see him have some sort of fantasy relevance in this matchup. I talked about San Francisco already, so I think we're good. Let's move on to the next game, shall we? And that is going to be the Sunday night game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks, and what a game this was. As somebody who started Chris Carson and quickly realized, oh shit, the Minnesota Vikings offense and their game plan is to kill the clock and run it down as much as possible, I did not feel great about how this game was going to go. So the Vikings lose to Seattle, it turns out. The Seahawks beat Minnesota by a final score of 27-26. Seahawks improved to 5-0. The Vikings 1-4. Kirk Cousins 27 of 39 for 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also had 2 turnovers as well, an interception and a fumble. Dalvin Cook left this game in the third quarter with a groin injury, but besides that, he was balling out. Cook 17 carries, 5 of 5 through the air for 89 total yards and a touchdown. Alexander Mattison in place of Dalvin Cook, 20 carries, 3 of 3 through the air, and 136 total yards. So that offense just kept rolling in the run game without Cook on the field. And Adam Thielen balled out as well, 9 of 13, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But the Seattle Seahawks and this offense is the most fun thing to watch in the NFL this season. Russell Wilson cooks again, 20 of 32, 217 yards, 58 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, also had an interception. Chris Carson, 8 carries, 6 of 7 through the air, 79 total yards, and a monster touchdown where he basically just ran through the Minnesota Vikings. And DK Metcalf balls out for the 5th straight week of the year. 11 targets, 6 receptions for 93 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Also the game-winning touchdown. Basically, his time expired in this game. And Tyler Lockett, 4 of 5 for 44 yards, the letdown game for him. DK Metcalf is the only player with 90-plus receiving yards every single week to start the 2020 season. I'm so excited to talk about this game. So, I quickly realized that that Minnesota's plan was to kill clock. And if you guys remember, if you guys watched this game, the plan was, not even the plan. As this game quickly rolled, the Seattle Seahawks got their second possession with 7 minutes left in the second quarter. It was one of those things where the time of possession early on in the game was 15-5, I believe, at halftime. 15 minutes to 5. No, that doesn't make sense. No, right. So it'd be for the second, right, middle second quarter. The time of possession was 15 minutes to 5. It was insane. And the Vikings' plan was just to run the ball, kill the clock. And honestly, not a bad strategy when you're facing Russell Wilson, who is the league's MVP at this point of the season, who is lighting every single team that he faces on fire. And that strategy proved very well for fantasy purposes, with Dalvin Cook balling out Alexander Mattison taking over and coming in and doing the exact same thing. Obviously, you probably weren't starting Alexander Mattison, all things considered, because Dalvin Cook was healthy entering this game. But just to see both guys play well actually has to be encouraging for the Dalvin Cook owner, who probably should own Alexander Mattison as a safety option, because now you have the confidence that if Dalvin Cook misses a few games with this groin injury, or a game, should I say, I think he's going to miss. He tried to come back, played one snap, and was like, nah, I can't do it. And then that's when Mattison took over for the rest of the game. So if Dalvin Cook misses next week, Alexander Mattison came in and proved to you that he can be started. During Cook's absence. Adam Thielen, balling out, the number one option for Kirk Cousins and this Vikings team, gets in the end zone twice, 90-plus receiving yards. Thielen's played extremely well this season. He was a guy who was being extremely undervalued in the pre-draft process, and just to see him continue to impress really isn't surprising, because the disrespect that he was getting was borderline absurd. He was going in that 4th or 5th round, and he was easily a guy who was going to finish as the top 15 wide receiver. He is currently wide receiver 2 on the year. This was so obvious, especially with the loss of Stephon Diggs this offseason, that Thielen was going to be the guy, like the number one option in Minnesota. And unfortunately, we all have to... well, this is my water, but we can take this one. We got to pour one out for Justin Jefferson. The matchup was there. The matchup was there. The hot streak was there. And it just didn't materialize. That's something that we got wrong. Myself, every other fantasy analyst. Don't worry, I started him. So if you started him too, I went down with the ship. I went down with you. Justin Jefferson in a prime matchup, or what was supposed to be a prime matchup. Remember, entering this game, Seattle was giving up 41.8 points to the wide receiver position. Jefferson comes in, 3 targets, 5 receptions. I'm sorry, 5 targets, 3 receptions. I always get that number wrong. I get those backwards. 3 receptions, 5 targets for 23 yards. And it was really funny watching this game and just hearing Chris Collinsworth in his commentary just keep trying to anticipate the Justin Jefferson big play, and it just never happened, right? And it was just one of those games where, again, once I realized during that second quarter, and even honestly it was during the first quarter, oh shit, the Vikings are going to kill the clock all game, I knew Justin Jefferson's night was done. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Just immediately, it was, they're going to give the ball, they're going to hand it off. Short pass to move the chains on third down. Hand the ball. Short pass to move the chains on third down. And that was just going to be the cycle that the Vikings used. I mean, they were just... The other thing, too, is they had 2. I believe it's 2. The Vikings had 2 drives this game that were so methodical, that started at Seattle's 5-yard line. And they went all the way downfield. And they just burned clock. So this just had dud game for Justin Jefferson written all over it pretty quickly. And you got to take your medicine sometimes, and this was definitely one of those games. Moving over to the Seahawks, though, Russell Wilson does Russ things. Oh, my God. Even in games where he doesn't look great, he had a really bad interception in this game. Russell Wilson, what can you say? Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in football right now. It is lights out. I think the thing that's actually really interesting about Russ, and this is something that is going to sound hyperbolic, but I want you to consider what I'm actually saying here. Russell Wilson might actually be the combination of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And what I mean by that is he has the playmaking ability with his arm of Patrick Mahomes, but he also has the rushing ability of Lamar. And I just think that's something that we don't fully realize at times. Obviously, we knew that Russell Wilson is just a great quarterback, right? But what he's doing so far this year with the cast of weapons, whether it is Chris Carson on the ground or through the air with him, DK Metcalf, obviously, and Tyler Lockett, this team, this offense truly does feel unstoppable right now in a way that I don't know. See, like that's the thing. I was gonna say I don't know if we've ever seen this per se, but I know saying that is wrong because we saw Baltimore last year and we saw Kansas City the year before and even during the postseason. Um, but basically though, like for me, it like the three pantheon teams right now. It's Kansas City, it's Baltimore, and it's Seattle. And it's so fun. It's so fun to see these three great quarterbacks at the top of the league, and all of them are just cooking. And yes, Lamar's played bad, and I've already talked about him in this video. And Russ is just through the roof, and Mahomes is just kind of staying above water, going a bit up and down as he tries to really navigate this post sleepover or this post Super Bowl hangover a bit. Regardless, just Seattle. Like, that's the tweet, right? We've been saying this for the past 5 weeks. Start everybody on Seattle. Russ, Carson, Metcalf, Lockett. It's been so much fun to see them ball out. And this was the thing entering the week that I was really talking about, and I've spent a lot of time talking about it already, I feel like. Really just trying to understand what Chris Carson's value is this season, because the big thing was, well, if let Russ cook happens, does that tank Chris Carson's value? And really trying to figure out where I personally landed on that, because like the argument is, yes, it tanks his value because he's not going to get the goal line work, and he might get limited rushing attempts. But then if they let Russ cook and this offense is better, that means that they're going to move the ball, score more points, and they can really do more things on offense. And I think the second part, the latter, is where I'm at, because we've seen now Chris Carson with 2 games this year where he's had carries of 6 and 8 respectively, and he's still getting in the end zone. He's still getting it done. In a game like this with 8 carries, he gets 6 receptions, right? Finishes the game with 16.9 fantasy points in half-point formats. It really is impressive. So I'm at this point now, like, Chris Carson, like, you're good. I have no worries for Chris Carson moving forward. I knew I never really had great concerns. It was just one of those things we're trying to evaluate what Chris Carson actually was for fantasy purposes this season. I have my answer, and he is legitimately a top 5 running back for the rest of the year. He is that impressive for this team. DK Metcalf, I mean, what else can you say? What else can you say? He is the number 1 wide receiver in standard. He's number 4 in PPR. 90-plus receiving yards in every single game. A touchdown machine. He's 6'4". He's a monster human being. He's fast. He's strong. He's physical. He's athletic. I'm at a loss for words. This wasn't unexpected from me. If you've listened to my history with DK Metcalf, you guys know how much I loved him. I loved him coming out of college. I thought it was absurd that he wasn't drafted in the first round. I thought it was absurd that multiple teams passed on him twice. The Packers passed on him 3 times. Drafting, again, isn't this hard. If NFL GMs and just GMs in general and all sports make drafting way more complicated than it needs to be. DK Metcalf was a surefire pick coming out of college, and the fact that there was questions about his game was utterly insane. So to see him come out and do this in year 2 and just continue to absolutely set the game on fire is super fucking dope. I tweeted about this yesterday. JJ Zachariason tweeted that DK Metcalf is Dynasty wide receiver 1. And I said, not now. JJ, I'm grieving. If you guys don't know the story, I traded DK Metcalf in June. This would have been, when was my rookie draft? My rookie draft was June 30th. I'm not June, I'm in August. My rookie draft was August 30th. And there was a deal all offseason long between me and another owner who loves DK just as much as I do. And the offer was going to be A.J. Brown and a second round pick for DK Metcalf. And we were both kind of on the fence for it. All off season long. I mean, that was a deal that was being discussed in June. And then the draft happens in August, and he actually takes the running back that I really wanted, and that was Zach Moss coming into his rookie season in Buffalo. So after the draft, I'm like, hey, I'll do it. I'll do DK for A.J. Brown and Zach Moss. Deal was done pretty much immediately, and again, the reason why I did that deal, and I was explaining this on Twitter yesterday. I still think this is a great deal. A.J. Brown, we haven't seen on the field yet, but we know what he's done during his rookie season, and it's funny, out last night to cope with DK Metcalf. I actually went through and I was putting on A.J. Brown highlights and watching those to make myself feel better about the trade. Because it's no fun seeing you trade away the number one wide receiver, right? And you're seeing everybody just gas him up and just praise DK Metcalf. So it's never fun to see that after you just traded him away. But I haven't been able to see my side of the deal on the field yet, right? A.J. Brown was hurt with that knee injury and obviously the COVID games. And then for Zach Moss, who's battling a toe injury for the past few weeks as well. So I haven't been able to see my end of the deal. But regardless, I felt like I was getting back a top 5 wide receiver in return, like in terms of like career trajectory, right? So like I felt like DK and AJ were on the same trajectory, all things considered. They were both going to be top 3, top 5 wide receivers. And then just getting the additional asset in Zach Moss back, and I've talked about this in this video, how much I love running backs and just the value that running backs hold to me. It was almost a no-brainer to make that deal, and I got the running back that I wanted to draft in my rookie draft anyway. So I'm still fine with the deal. Just hurts a little bit because I haven't been able to see my end of the bargain hold up. All right, let's move on to another game. I almost just hit the wrong button there. All right, let's move on to another game here, and that is the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. And what a game this was. I took the Cowboys in my survivor pool. And they barely escaped, defeating the New York Giants by a final score of 37-34. The Giants dropped to 0-5. The Cowboys 3-2. But the big story here, before I even get to any of the stats, that is Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott, it was either the third or fourth quarter. I don't even really remember because everything that happened after that was such a blur. Prescott rolls out, scrambles, gets hit, and just gets the entire defender on his leg. Compound fracture in his ankle. There were reports that the bone was out of the skin, unfortunately, and it was one of those things where everything stopped at that point in time. And we've seen injuries like this before. I was at the Q. I was at Quicken Loans Arena the night that Gordon Hayward snapped his ankle. I was there. I saw it. That was wild. But I think, because that was one of those things where I was there, but I was in the nosebleeds. But like, if you've ever been to Quicken Loans Arena, you guys know that the way that the queue is designed, there really is no such thing as a nosebleed seat. You have a pretty good view of pretty much everything, and I was actually on the side of where it happened, and it was like right in front of me. So I'm looking down, and Hayward goes up for the dunk, comes down, and the ankle is sideways, and I'm just like, fuck. It was very, you guys know the video. It's like, it's all viral. You guys know what happened. But so seeing Dak's ankle, this is my long-winded way of saying that seeing Dak's ankle sideways. Can I get this out? Thank you. Seeing Dak's ankle sideways wasn't as gruesome to me as initially as some other people. And granted, it wasn't at the same rotational level as Gordon Hayward's, because Hayward's was completely sideways. But to see Dak's ankle like that, and just the air let out of Cowboys Stadium, and the coaches and the players just like distraught in a way. Not fun. Injuries aren't fun, and obviously the fact that Dak hasn't gotten paid yet adds another layer to this. Fuck the Cowboys for not paying Dak. But I guess going back to this game, we have fantasy implications to talk about here. Daniel Jones continues to struggle. This is nothing new. I talked about this all off season long. Daniel Jones, I was not excited about him coming into the season. 20 of 33, 222 yards and a fumble. Daniel Jones has 8 turnovers on the year and only 2 passing touchdowns. Devonta Freeman is the bell cow running back here. You need to go pick him up on waiver wires immediately. 17 carries, 87 total yards, and a touchdown. And Darius Slayton, like I said, I expected him to have a great game this week. He came through for you. 11 targets, 8 receptions for 129 yards. And like I said, this matchup had Slayton game written all over it. For Dallas, Prescott, before he went out with that ankle injury, 14 of 21, 166 passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Zeke, obviously going to do Zeke things, 19 carries, 91 total yards, and 2 touchdowns. I'm sorry, just 91 rushing yards, not total yards. He actually did a few yards through the air as well. And then finally, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb looks so fucking legit. We're going to talk about him in just a moment. 8 receptions on 11 targets, 124 yards. And Michael Gallup, the Michael Gallup game kind of happened. 4 for 4 for 73 yards. So let's talk about this real quick. We'll talk about the Giants first because there's not a whole lot to talk about here, all things considered. The big thing here is Devonta Freeman. I don't know the exact percentage of where Devonta Freeman is rostered, but I know for a fact he was just recently picked up off my waiver wire. So I'm going to assume and go out on the limb to say that he's going to be still available in some leagues, and you have to go get him now. At this point, the Giants are now dead set on making him their lead running back. It's not even close. He's being involved in the receiving game as well. You can play Devonta Freeman week in and week out now if he is going to continuously get 17 carries and get some work through the air as well. The one bright spot, really, in this Giants offense. Slayton, not much I need to say here. I still don't know when you are ever fully confident in starting him. He's another guy who really is matchup dependent for me. And then fuck it. We're just going to talk about the Cowboys now real quick. I'm not going to... I still don't really know where I land on this, all things considered. Andy Dalton, when he played and when he came in, he was 9 of 11 for 111 yards, and he led the game-winning drive. So, and we know from Andy Dalton's career, he's been a fine fantasy quarterback. He actually has the weapons here to be a very good fantasy quarterback. I'm not going to go out and say top 10 or top 12, but I think Andy Dalton is going to be startable for you every single week. He's kind of in that similar category for me as Gardner Minshew, as Matt Stafford, just that guy who should be able to get you at a minimum 17 fantasy points for you week in and week out. For me, the question really becomes, what do we do with this Cowboys receiving core of CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Amari Cooper? Cooper absolutely busted for you this game. And Dalton Schultz even. For me, this is going to sound out. Who does Dallas play next week? Oh, they play Arizona. Fuck. Okay. Since they play Arizona, okay. They play Arizona. Teams are starting to go on bye weeks next week. I know Seattle has a bye. Okay. So with that being said, we're still going to roll off of the basis. You are starting your Cowboys every single week. This offense, even without Dak, still has the pieces that are too good to fail. Yes, Andy Dalton is not Dak Prescott, but Andy Dalton is still a fine quarterback. And the reason why the Cowboys brought in Andy Dalton was because of this. For this reason right here, if anything were to happen to Dak, Dalton can slide right in and be perfectly fine with the cast of weapons that they have. So, for this upcoming week, and I'm going to talk about this obviously for my Cardinals and Cowboys preview, we're still going to roll with the Cowboys offense here. The pieces are too good, the talent is there, and this defense still being bad, giving up 34 points to the fucking Giants, is still awful. So points have to be scored in order for games to be won here in Dallas, and that just means fantasy-relevant players are going to be abundant, and they're going to continue to be so, even without Dak Prescott leading this team. But we got one final game here to talk about, and that is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's jump to that box score real quick. The Steelers come through and improve to 4-0, defeating the Eagles in the Battle of Pennsylvania. I don't know what you guys call it over there. 38-29. The Eagles are now 1-3-1. Carson Wentz continues to look meh, and that was 20 of 35 for 258 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Miles Sanders' game looks better than it actually was. his stat line: 11 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Miles Sanders had 74 yards come off of one play, and that was the monster touchdown run that he had. So if you were to take that away, it really wasn't a great day for him whatsoever. Travis Fulgham, wow, what a performance he had. 10 of 13, 152 receiving yards, and a touchdown. He's a guy who we're going to be talking about. And Zach Ertz duds. Yet again, I don't know what the fuck is happening here with him, man. One reception, 6 targets, 6 yards. We're going to have to spend some time talking about Zach Ertz here. Going over to the Steelers, though, and the winning team in this battle, Big Ben balls out yet again, 27-38, 239 yards, and 3 touchdowns. James Conner, again, when James Conner is healthy, you are playing him. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this. 15 carries, 400, imagine. Yeah, with the way that I'm hyping him up, he might as well have 400 yards. 44 yards and a touchdown. Chase fucking Claypool. 7 of 11, 110 yards and 4 touchdowns. 3 of them were receiving touchdowns, and 1 was a reverse pass, so that counts as a rushing touchdown. And Deontay Johnson left this game in the second quarter due to a back injury. We got a few things to talk about here from this game. Let's start off with the Eagles real quick. Miles Sanders, just again, that 74-yard touchdown run makes his game look way better than it actually was. But regardless, points are points, and we're gonna take it. I said in my preview, you were still starting Miles Sanders because you had to, but you had to really lower your expectations. So to see him come through in a game like this and really just put on a show was really cool. Let's see here. For the wide receiving core, Travis Fulgham, we just need to. I'm really trying to figure out what to do with him. In all honesty, right? This is a guy. Alshon Jeffrey might be back next week. Deshaun Jackson might be back next week, but Travis Fulgham, just a name to keep an eye on, just in case these guys aren't. They actually play Baltimore next week, so it's not a great matchup by any means. But Fulgham, 13 targets in this game. He was the clear-cut number one wide receiver. He got it done in the end zone now in back-to-back games, and it looks like he has some level of chemistry with Carson Wentz, so he's not a name that we can fully ignore. What I would actually do, and I think this is actually a pretty interesting idea, I would consider picking up Fulgham off waivers. I wouldn't spend a ton on him, all things considered, but I would pick him up this week, see if Alshon Jeffrey or Deshaun Jackson are active, and depending on if they are, I would then either keep Fulgham or I would cut him again and pick back up whoever I dropped. I think that's a bit of an interesting strategy for this week, just because if he is going to get if he is going to get 13 targets, catch 10 passes in a game where they should be trailing versus Baltimore, there is opportunity for Fulgham to have another great game. Let's talk about Zach Ertz real quick, and then we'll shift back over to the Steelers. Ertz just isn't getting it done. The snaps are there, the targets are there. 5, 7, 4. I'm sorry. Those were the reception totals. 7, 7, 10, 5, 6. The targets are there. He's just not coming through. Plays Baltimore, then the Giants, then Dallas, then a bye week. What do you do with Zach Ertz? Dallas Goedert's still out with that ankle injury. So what I would likely do, I really think you have to stay the course with them. I really do. Just judging off of the landscape of the tight end position, how many tight ends are actively going to be available? I'm going to pull this up right now. Let's go season. All right. So, for example, right, Kelsey, Andrews, Waller. Robert Tonyan is currently the number 4 tight end, but that's because of the big week. He's actually a guy, if Tonyan's on your waiver wire, I'd rather have Tonyan rest of the season than Zach Ertz. I'd rather have Zach Ertz over Mike Gesicki. George Kittle, obviously. I'd rather have Kittle. But just going through the list here just a little bit, the tight end landscape, again, just is in utter shambles. We thought this year it would be so good, and it just hasn't been. And that's the reason why I'm going to continue to stick it out with Zach Ertz, because of the fact of your options. Oh, because of the fact that your options are so limited now at this point, and the tight ends who you're actually confident in picking up week in and week out, unless you want to try and stream the position every single week, that's maybe an interesting debate that you could have. But for now, I'd keep Ertz. Maybe there's a team in your league that rosters multiple tight ends, and you want to try and pry one away. That's an option for you. But as currently stands, I just think you have to roll with the punches still. It's not fun. It's never a good time to start a tight end who's underperforming in this way. But with this Eagles offense, there's still not a whole lot of weapons there, and Zach Ertz should be able to get it done, and he just hasn't for you for one reason or another. So with Ertz, I'm gonna hold him because I'm holding him because I don't anticipate that there is a better option on your waiver wire than Zach Ertz. Again, the number one target I'd look for is Robert Tonyan, and if not Tonyan, then maybe Jonnu Smith is on your waiver wire still. I'm not entirely sure. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to look up add player. I'm going to look up the availability of some tight ends right now. Let's go roster. There we go. Okay. So Robert Tonyan in ESPN leagues is currently rostered in 48%. Austin Hooper, who's seeing increased in targets and increased volume in Cleveland. I talked about him already in this video. He is seeing 45% he's being rostered in 45% of leagues. He's another name to keep an eye on. Let's see. Anybody else though? Like, are we really gonna go with TJ Hawkinson? I mean, maybe. He's seeing actually more work than I anticipated he would. Hawkinson's an interesting name. If you want to roll the dice on, it's never a fun thing, but Jimmy Graham has weekly touchdown potential week in and week out. So if you want to spin that wheel, you can. But I think you really get the point now. And if you've been paying attention to the tight end landscape with Tyler Higbee going here then down here, Noah Fant obviously being injured, Hayden Hurst dead. Tyler, or who's another name I can throw out real quick? Chris Herndon. The expectation he would be up here, and he's down here at the bottom. So the tight end landscape is all of a sudden a barren wasteland. So if you have Zach Ertz, you got to make that decision. I'd probably keep him and just roll with it. It's been tough sledding, but hopefully better days are ahead because again the targets and the snaps are there for him. Moving over to the Steelers real quick though. Ben Roethlisberger needs to be rostered. It really is unbelievable. 20 plus fantasy points, I think, in every single game. He's played really well. His cast of weapons is superb between James Conner, Deontay Johnson, who's been injured, more on him in just a bit, Juju, and then Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron. Like, he's just got a cast of weapons here that he can just gunsling to. And that's got to be really great for a quarterback to be aging, to have the confidence and the talent around him to continue to put up great numbers. James Conner, you're starting him every single week. It's my favorite thing. The James Conner hate went too far this offseason, and you were able to get him at such a value in that 4th, 5th, or 6th round territory. To see him producing the way that he has, it's been super, super cool. In terms of the receiving options here, I'm not going to panic about Juju. Just trying to figure out where Juju fits into the grand scheme of things. Luckily, he was being drafted in a spot where maybe he's not your number one wide receiver, but he's more so your 2, and he's fine for you in that role. But with Juju, it really is just understanding that there are other guys now in this offense. So what Juju's actual ceiling is to be determined. But I still feel pretty confident in what Juju's floor is on a week in, week out basis. This matchup versus Philadelphia wasn't a great one. I know I got a lot of tweets saying that Darius Slay, one of the best corners in the NFL, was on Juju pretty much all game. So that's obviously going to take away from Juju's production. And that's something that I honestly didn't even consider in factoring Juju Smith-Schuster for the week. Because Juju, for me, is just a guy where if you got him, you're probably going to play him week in and week out. Chase Claypool, I whiffed on Chase Claypool. I did. This offseason, during my Dynasty stuff, just going through wide receivers, and obviously this is one of the best wide receiver class, maybe of all time, with the way that things have shaken out early on here. So to see Chase Claypool play well is just another testament to how deep this draft class was. Just going through Chase Claypool and breaking down some of his tape and just my projection for him in the NFL, I honestly really didn't even see it. But of course, he goes to a great organization with coaches that know how to maximize players and talents, and he's balled out. Just to see him have a game where he scores 4 touchdowns, being targeted 11 times, it's wild. People are going to chase points, though, and that's not a pun. That is an unintended pun here. So people are going to chase points with Chase Claypool, and I actually think that might be the wrong strategy. Claypool is going to continue to be good. He is, especially if Diontae Johnson continues to miss time due to his variety of injuries, being concussed and now this back injury, which I think is going to keep him out for probably a week or so. So Claypool should be rostered, but let's not get crazy and throw him into our lineup immediately. If Diontae Johnson is out, maybe by all means go ahead, right? In that case, you got the green light to do it, but I'm not going to be in a place where I'm going to rush and chase the points and throw them into my lineup immediately. Mike Clay pointed this out of ESPN. Chase Claypool has 4 touchdowns on the year without a single red zone target. And that's borderline absurd. He was making the point that regression is coming, and you got to kind of agree to that. But I guess with that being said, is what does he look like when he actually does get those red zone looks? So while yes, the argument that red zone or that regression is coming for him, there's actually the argument for the other side that he's only going to continue to get better and better and better because of the fact that he hasn't even been targeted at that point of the field. So Chase Claypool is a guy who I'm going to look to add. I wouldn't go crazy on Fab for him, because I don't think he's going to be an absolute game breaker by any means. But if you needed to and you're needy at wide receiver, he's definitely probably one of the top priorities on the week. Anything else here? I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it for this game. And if I'm not mistaken, that is the last game of the week. The Chargers and Saints are currently playing right now. It's halftime. The score is 20-10. So I'm going to have to probably do a quick recap of the first half when I get done recording this video. So before that, though, first off, thank you for watching. If you stuck around this long, 2 hours and 6 minutes. Let's go. I love this. Being able to just knock everything out all at once instead of having to stop and record 17 different times. Because what that did for me, that was so exhausting in the point where I would look, I got this piece of paper from earlier. Can I focus up here? This piece of paper from earlier, there we go. Oh, that's really bad. I'm not even going to try and mess with the focus here. It's basically a list of every single game. So what I have to do is I would go through and I would X off. And that was just so exhausting because at some point covering 16 games, you'd be like, fuck, I still have 10 more of these things to do. Fuck, I still have 7 more of these things to do. Which obviously, I love talking fantasy, right? And it's stuff that I would normally be doing anyway with like friends or family. But just going through the gauntlet 16 straight times, it was just a bit more than I anticipated it to be. Again, if you've missed it or if you just forgot what I said in the first part of the video, the plan is to upload this entire thing into one video, also upload it as a podcast as well. I'm likely going to timestamp where each game is at, so if you want to jump around that way. But one of the things that I'm also going to do is I'm going to upload each game on an individual basis as well, just because I really do love that style for me and for my content. Again, you can follow me on all social media platforms at FF Vulture. Subscribe down below so you never miss a video from me. And remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. And I will see you for our Week 6 game previews. Actually, we're going to have to finish up Week 5 with Monday night and Tuesday night football. All right, I'm out. Later.